Introduction. Welcome to this genealogical recording brought to you by Aquitaine Publishing, copyright 2025, all rights reserved. This recording is dedicated to preserving the rich tapestry of family histories, connecting generations past and present. Through detailed research and personal accounts, we delve into the roots of heritage, uncovering the stories that shaped the lives of those who came before us. It is our hope that this record serves not only as a chronicle of lineage, but as an enduring legacy for future generations. Please enjoy this journey through time where every name, date, and story brings history to life.
Thomas Olin Shanks wrote of his grandfather, James Shanks. My father was a Methodist preacher. His father was a Methodist itinerant preacher in the Alabama Conference. He preached for about 50 years, and just before he died as a superannuate at his old home, just a quarter of a mile from there, I was born in Clarke County, Mississippi. He said that there had been 20,000 converts to his ministry. This was Reverend James Shanks. James C. Shanks was born November 19, 1798, in Marion, South Carolina, the oldest child of George Shanks and his still unknown wife. He is the first known descendant of William Shanks, born in America. At the 13th session of the Alabama Conference, met at Wetumpka in 1845, and when appointments were read, James Shanks was the choice for the Choctawhatchee Circuit. The author of History of the First United Methodist Church of Ozark, Alabama, Glenn Wells, reported, Reverend Shanks was 30 years old when admitted to the conference in 1833 and was now 47 and a preacher of extraordinary force. T.S. West wrote a memoir of James Shanks and stated, he was converted in 1827 and began to preach immediately. He entered the itinerant work in the Alabama Conference about 1832. He located about 1845 on account of the ill health of his wife. He moved to Mississippi in 1854. About this time his wife died, and he again entered the lists of the traveling preacher. It was then I first knew him. He labored faithfully, acceptably, and successfully until 1874, when he was superannuated. His last sickness was long and painful, but he had the comforts of religion in his last affliction. Some days before he died, he expressed himself as being happier than he had ever been before. I once asked him if he shouted when he was converted. He said yes, for 2 years, and averred that he had more or less of religious ecstasy for 2 years immediately after his conversion. His pilgrimage here lacked only a few days of 80 years. He was a Methodist preacher, a little over a half-century. Scores were brought into the folds of Christ through his instrumentality, your humble servant among the number. May our last days be as full of religion's comfort as his. The wife mentioned by West was Elizabeth Bass. She and James had 4 children. The youngest was Wilbur, and the second oldest was Jeremiah. In between was Elizabeth Jane. Eliza was born July 31, 1831, and died Jan 28, 1884, in Clarke County, Mississippi. She married John Wesley McKissick, named for the founder of Methodism, on Christmas Day, 1849, and they had children Mary, Edward James W. Jr., Jenny, Charles, Thomas, and George. The oldest child was named George Elbert Shanks. George became a lay Methodist minister for approximately 50 years in Mississippi and Texas. George married Mary Ann Wright on November 1, 1842, in Clarke County, Alabama. According to the account by his son Thomas, George sought entrance into the Methodist Conference, but was rejected because of his large family. Therefore, George remained a lay minister. In 1850, George and his family were living in Barber County, Alabama. According to the obituary of Marion Shanks, the family moved to Clarke County, Mississippi, in 1856. In the 1860 Mississippi census, George, listed as a Methodist minister, was living near his father James and the widow of his brother Wilbur, Josephine DeFee, and her 2 daughters. According to Thomas, his brothers farmed, and his father George ran a country store in Clarke County, but in 1876 the family pulled up stakes, moved to Texas. Thomas Shanks remembered the trip. We crossed the Mississippi River in an ox wagon the day I was 9. We had also a hack drawn by 2 mules, and my father rode a big bay horse. Mr. Gunter, whose son married my sister Eliza, was with us. He drove a span of mules. It took us just 35 days to make the trip. In the censuses of 1870, 1880, and 1900, George follows the practice of listing his occupation as farmer. Because of physical infirmities of his wife, James located or became a local minister instead of being itinerant. Around 1854, James moved his family to Shubuta, Clarke County, Mississippi. His wife died shortly before or after the family moved to Mississippi. In December 1869, he was readmitted to the itinerant ministry and was a member of the Mississippi Conference until his death. A Clarke County tax roll from 1872 has James Shanks listed not far from his nephew, John Shanks. The Jackson, Mississippi Clarion Ledger from Jan 1872 noted that James Shanks was assigned to Wayne County by the Methodist Conference. Philip H. Napier was assigned to Shubuta in Clarke County. Philip Napier's brother Benjamin Bruton Napier was the father of John Hawkins Napier Sr., who would marry Laura Shanks, the grandniece of James Shanks. The 100th anniversary of the Shubuta Methodist Church recorded James Shanks as the pastor in 1869. The Jackson, Mississippi Clarion Ledger from Nov 20th, 1878, reported the death of Reverend James Shanks and noted that he was a faithful preacher, well posted in the Methodist Standard Authors, and filled with the Spirit. According to research by David Schultz, James reportedly is buried in the Old Liberty Methodist Church Cemetery, 7 miles east of Shubuta. However, no Shanks are listed as being buried in the Liberty Cemetery. T.S. West stated in his memoir of James Shanks, "He was a Methodist preacher a little over a half-century. Scores were brought into the folds of Christ through his instrumentality, your humble servant among the number. May our last days be as full of religion's comfort as his."